Right. Good morning, everyone. So welcome to the IAA seminar. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Somesh Jha. So I've been following his work since the start of my PhD. So it's glad to have him here. So Dr. Somesh Jha received his bachelor degree from IIT New Delhi in electrical engineering, and he received his PhD in computer science from CMU under the supervisor of Professor Edmund Clark, who is a Turing Award winner. And currently, Dr. Jha is a Lubar Professor in the Computer Science Department at University of Wisconsin-Madison. His work focuses on the analysis of security protocols, survivable analysis, intrusion detection, formal method for security, and analyzing malicious code. I still remember his famous paper on vulnerability signature, published in Oakland, 2006. And the reason actually changed his topic. So he focused more on his interest on privacy and adversarial ML. So he has very good and famous papers in adversarial ML, and he published several articles in highly referred conferences and prominent journals. He has won numerous best papers, so it's not countable, and distinguished paper award, and he's a fellow of SSS, ACM, IEEE. So without further ado, we'll have Dr. Jha present his talk.
Okay, let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes.
Thanks, Yinzi, for the great introduction. It's really glad to be here at the IAA seminar. And just a little bit, I'm a professor at University of Wisconsin, but this year I'm spending at Google. So just wanted to get that out of the way. So it should probably have said Wisconsin and Google. So this year I'm spending time in Mountain View, so I'll be spared some of the Madison winters. So here's the thing. So I want to kind of make these key takeaways in the talk, right? So I try to put the key takeaways in the beginning, almost like a lawyer, like you have a lawyer who makes saying, okay, these are our main points, we will now justify it. That's how I've kind of structured the talk. So the key takeaways here is that we need more system security perspective in trustworthy machine learning. Okay, and hopefully I will demonstrate this through some of the case studies. And so we need more security and formal analysis mindset type people to actually cross over to ML and both sides. So and crossing over from ML to the to security, privacy, and crypto, which is happening quite a bit. But we need more of that. And we need more systematic and automatic way of evaluating resilience of ML components. So for example, if you design a new crypto system, right? There is a very systematic, well, not very systematic, but there is at least sort of a blueprint saying, okay, now this is how you actually prove the security of a crypto system or a formal security system, and this is how you go about breaking them, and so on and so forth, right? So people who have done crypto, they know of the differential crypto analysis for symmetric crypto systems, and for software, we also have a lot of techniques. And hopefully I will make my case better than these two folks made for their case. And if you don't get the joke, that's fine. I'm just going to move on. Okay, I'm not going to spend too much time here. Machine learning is everywhere, being used in every sector, okay? Now, our task starts when 2013, you must have seen all these articles coming out that, hey, ML for some tasks is reaching or beating human level performance, okay? And like breaking captchas, recognizing objects and faces, and so on and so forth. You must have seen a lot of articles that sort of say that. And by the way, this is I know Johns Hopkins has a great medical school. A lot of my relatives are doctors. So this is, and my parents always thought I should have been a real doctor, not like a fake PhD doctor. So this is for, this is a dig back to my parents, I guess. Sort of for a lot of tasks like radiology readings and so on and so forth, ML was beating some of the specialists. I was, I just a little bit of an anecdote. One of my friends had some biopsy done, and they said, "Oh, it looks suspicious," but then he got a second opinion, and they say, "Well, that it's actually not suspicious." So, humans do make mistakes in these kind of readings, and so there were a lot of articles like, "Hey, ML is beating some of the doctors at their and radiologists at their task," and obviously it is deployed in a lot of adversarial settings where there might be adversaries present, like autonomous driving, YouTube filtering, and so on. I'm just not going to spend too much time. You basically get the sense, right, that ML is used everywhere, but it is also used in settings where there might be adversaries present. I want to kind of get to the meat of the talk. And by the way, since this is a talk at IAA, I need to say that, it's obviously in things like robotics, drones, autonomous driving, this is extremely important, right? Because there might be adversary present. So I gave a talk at one of the keynotes at one of the NeurIPS workshops. This is pre-pandemic, so this is like the, almost people have forgotten that there was a pre-pandemic era. And somebody asked me, like, I think more at the questions that are like, okay, you security people are coming into ML, like me. What is different about folks in security, privacy, and crypto? What is the mindset DNA that is different? Okay, and sometimes that is a good question because you don't, if you're in the field, you kind of don't think about it. So what makes us different than, let's say, somebody who's purely trained in ML or purely trained in systems or programming languages or networking or so on, right? By the way, especially because this is an online talk, you're sort of like, it just feels one way. So I would not mind if, somebody can chime up, give a question in the chat, and Yinzi, you can sort of probably, relay it back to me. Okay, so generally when we think about analyzing a system, we have a system or a primitive, sys, a security goal, a threat model, which basically says what an attacker can do, and security assumption. So in crypto, it's based on some hard problem in a sort of a lattice, or you say factoring is hard or discrete log is hard. Systems can be basically, what is your trusted computing base? What do you assume that the attacker cannot touch, so to speak, or tamper with? So some people say, okay, I will put a shadow stack and the attacker can touch the shadow stack, or have a trusted execution environment, or so on and so forth. And generally, our arguments go like this. It basically, a lot of the arguments will go like, if the attacker, following the threat model, can violate the security goal for a system primitive, then either the attacker has tampered with the TCB, which it was not supposed to, or can solve some hard problem efficiently. Okay, and the last one is just saying that a little logically. Now, I just want to be very sure, kind of. So then, how do systems and primitives get broken in our community? Well, shoddy proofs and arguments, right? Somebody just made a wrong argument, which does happen. The threat model is too weak. So for example, there are attacks found on trusted execution environments Well, that means, your assumption that T cannot be touched is weak. Your security assumption is not valid. In the early days of crypto, there were a lot of crypto systems, and they were broken because their basic assumption, like the problem they were basing on, could be solved in polynomial time. Now, so these first three are sort of very general stock kind of assumptions, but the third one is very interesting. A lot of our attacks, a lot of our community moves forward when brand and new ingenious attacks are found. Okay, which makes us go back to our drawing board and say, oh, now I cannot assume this thing because of this attack. For example, two things that come to mind. One is power analysis of Paul Kocher, right? So what he basically showed is by looking at side channels, in his case, power consumption, can lead to break in crypto systems where you can get keys, right? And that started a whole thing of like, wait, we also need to look at side channels, not just look at the algorithm. You also need to look at the implementation of the algorithm and what some of it leaks. There's a very famous paper by Hovav Shakam on something called ROP gadgets, where he showed that an attacker doesn't, and again, I'm sort of paraphrasing these things. The paper has a lot more details. The attacker doesn't need to just rely on code they inject. They can actually use gadgets in the program to kind of piece together an attack. So what this happens is when these ingenious attacks were found, same thing with like Spectre meltdown, right? We have to go back to our drawing board, update our security assumptions, and go forward. So Yinzi, I'm assuming you will relay the questions to me.
Yes, we don't have questions so far.
Yeah, okay. Because I sort of, otherwise it looks like, a very one-way kind of a thing. It reminds me of my dad when he used to give me advice. It's just all one way, which I don't like. Okay, so this is how our attack, this in our community, this is how kind of things move, this attack fix cycle, right? And frankly speaking, some of my papers people have attacked and have found weaknesses in. Some very famous people's papers have been attacked and broken, and the system moves. Actually, I have known of cases where advisors later, I will not, if you send me a private chat, I will send you some things where the advisors later have broken some of the systems that their students came up with during thesis. So at least in our community, security, privacy, and crypto, write shoddy papers that get broken, but sometimes people find very clever things, and this is kind of like we think this is the DNA of our community. Now on the other side, I don't think, and this I will keep coming back to this. I think some of the other communities are not very used to this attack fix cycle, so they take these attacks very personal. And let me give you an anecdote on that. When the first Spectre meltdown, sort of these attacks came out on computer sort of microarchitectures and hardware, we had we have a very strong architecture group here at Wisconsin, and somebody came and gave a talk about this. And the architect were basically, oh well, this is some, I don't think this can happen in real life. This is just some sort of a curiosity. And now and essentially didn't react. I didn't think they reacted very well with an open mind. And now guess what, right? If you look at ISCA Micro, these conferences, every third paper is about on this subject. I just wanted to show this. I was giving this talk somewhere, and Nikita Borisov of UIUC made this comment that, hey, but all security papers don't have proofs. Yes, I agree with that. What I've said so far, all security papers don't have proofs, but we kind of have this mindset. We at least go through this argument of threat model, sort of having a security goal and so on, even if it is in English. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 2 case studies to basically highlight my point that we actually need more of security crypto people entering sort of, machine learning. So I need to set up a little bit. Both the case studies I'll talk about is at the intersection of machine learning and privacy. So there is this gold standard for privacy called differential privacy, which was put forth in the seminal paper by Cynthia Dwar. And most of the frameworks, right, like TensorFlow and others, and they support this variant of stochastic gradient descent, which is used for learning for machine learning. They support a DP version of it called DPSGD. And I'm not going to get sort of too much into the weeds of DPSGD. So then what's the problem? Why are people still working on machine learning and privacy? You just code it in TensorFlow, use DPSGD, you're done, right? The problem is that there is a huge accuracy drop when you train using DPSGD. Okay, so I think this number keeps getting better, but I think it's on CFAR 10 and other big sets. The drop in accuracy can be almost 20%, which is unacceptable for some tasks, right? So that's kind of the bad news. By the way, the right side, that's my icon for bad news. That is when India, in this recent World Cup, lost. So that's my go-to icon for bad news. So that's kind of the bad news, right? If DPSGD worked, there was not much of an accuracy drop. Well, a lot of the 2 case studies that I'm going to talk about won't happen. For example, there is a very nice paper by Florian Tramer and Dan Bonnet in ICLR 2021, which showed that with kind of very good feature engineering, simple models can beat deep models trained using DPSGD. Okay, so that's why people have been searching for alternatives for DPSGD, other ways to do things other than DPSGD. Okay, the first work that I'm going to talk about is was in Oakland 20. By the way, somehow I don't know. This pandemic has stretched time. 2021 feels a long time back to me, and it just everything has kind of stretched. So this was a system called InstaHide, which we actually broke. InstaHide tries to do what DPSGD did, but they didn't have as formal guarantees. So I'm going to talk a little bit about InstaHide and how we broke it. But again, let's not lose the big picture. The big picture is what I wanted to tell you before, is that we need more of security and crypto people to kind of look at these ML systems and start kind of crypto analyzing and trying to break them. And as I said, this is not like a malicious activity. We don't view this as a malicious activity. This is the DNA of our field. And as you can see, there are people here from system security, crypto, privacy, and so on. Okay, I'm not going to say too much. Machine learning is an algorithm, L, where it's trying to learn a concept called dog and cat and learn something where it tries to then label new images that you give as dog and cat, okay? And the private machine learning says, can we make this process private? Okay, so insta-hide is it tries to do something called instance encoding, okay? So here is the basic idea. The basic idea is that if I take my data set and I encode it in some way, okay? And then I can learn over the encoded data, then by definition, I'm not leaking private information because I'm learning from the encoded data rather than the original data. That's kind of what insta-hide uses, instance encoding, and this is what instance encoding is, right? So let's take this to the limit, right? If I could blur my images completely and learn something, which is probably not true, probably can't happen, then by definition, I'm not leaking any private information, right? So imagine medical records. I completely obfuscate them and still learn who can have what disease. Well, you probably can't do that, but then by definition, I'm not leaking information, right? So insta-hide is instance encoding algorithm for that. And as long as your encoding is private, your learning algorithm is private. Okay, so the benefit of this encoding is that encodings do not reveal information, and the computation can be done in encoding. And in a multi-party setting, like, as I was saying, Johns Hopkins has a very good medical school. If multiple clinics want to share data, they can encode it first, and then you learn in the joint data. So if such an encoding existed, it'll be great, okay? So insta-hide is an instance encoding scheme. The authors are on the top, Huang, Song, Lee, and Arora. It was published in ICML 20. It was won the second prize in the Bell Labs Prize, which is a very prestigious prize. And so what we started, in some sense, we started looking at this paper. I had read this paper before. It's a very well-written paper, exquisitely written indeed. And our work started more as like, hey, is private learning with instance encoding possible, right? So we started looking at insta-hide kind of with a critical eye. And then the second question, because insta-hide was a instance encoding scheme from a, sort of a very prominent group. And then the second thing we tried to look at is, can anything similar to insta-hide be private? Like similar instance encoding scheme can be private. So the first question is evaluating insta-hide. The second is, can anything similar to insta-hide be private? I'm not going to give too much details. What it does is, in machine learning, if you have worked in vision, there is this idea called mix-up. So the mix-up is basically what you do is you randomly kind of mix 4 images. Here, this is, I won't say what these images are. So insta-hide used a bunch of private data that you have and mixed it with some public data. Maybe you get it from Instagram or something like that. And so the first step was what is called mix-up. This is what you get. And then the second step was something called random flipping. It kind of flipped the signs of the pixels. Okay? And that's your insta-hide algorithm. Insta-hide algorithm can be thought about as mix-up, which is sort of mixing from private and public images, plus sign flipping. Okay. Now, what happened with insta-hide is they got really good results. So one thing that was surprising about the paper is, even though they do this mix-up plus random flipping, they were getting accuracy results that were stunning, that like 1 or 2% below what you would train with the normal training set. So that's kind of was very surprising, right? I mean, it is surprising. But because the learning algorithm, the accuracy was very high, you know that the encoded image, there is some signal here that the machine learning is picking up, right? So our reconstructing algorithm, what it basically did is, we had a clustering algorithm based on some metric, which was able to cluster encoded messages that came from the same source image. Okay, and then we were able to use this clustering to recover the original images. Okay, so this is an attack that this is the original image. And so the InstaHide people did put out an attack where they put out some original images and sort of encoded images, and you had to find out how extract the original images from that. So essentially, our attack showed that InstaHide was not private. Okay. Now the second question is, can anything like InstaHide be private? Okay. Maybe InstaHide is not private, but maybe there's a different tweak, something else, and can be private. And we actually have some theorems in our paper which basically showed that possibly it's probably not, it's very unlikely that an instance encoding scheme can work. So remember, our protocol is basically a learning function L and an encoding function E, and we are trying to learn a concept function. Let's say 0 is cat versus dog, right? So we drew some inspiration from how cryptographic games are set. And here is a game that we are going to play, the challenger and adversary are going to play, right? So I have two images of dog, and you encode these images, and I give the challenger encodes it and gives a random one to the adversary. The adversary has to guess whether the encoded picture is of the white dog or the black dog. Okay. If there are cryptographers in the audience, this is very similar to like the semantic security style games that we use in cryptography. Now, if the encoding scheme was not leaking any information, what would the attackers best, the attacker can at best do random, right? Half. If it is more than half, then you know that the encoding is somehow leaking information. Okay, so our first result basically showed that if a learning protocol, remember, a learning protocol is the learning algorithm L and an encoding function E, achieves better than random privacy for random accuracy, so more than half plus epsilon, on for concept function. This is very important. So if you have a dog and cat classifier, I want your learning algorithm to do good for dog, cat, and also some for other concept. For example, whether the dog is, black or not black, or white or not white. And then what we show is that there is a polynomial time adversary that can break that game that I just showed you with better than half advantage. So what is informally going on here? Informally, what this is saying is, if your learning and encoding algorithm is doing better than random chance on two tasks, two concept functions, two learning tasks, then there is an adversary that can take advantage of that and do better than random guessing for that game. So your machine learning, it's kind of sort of using that, the attacker is able to leverage it. And so I think I won't get into the proof. The proof basically shows that, if the security game is based on C1, I can kind of use C2 to break the game. I'm not going to get into that. And then we have another version of another version of that theory, which is sort of distributional, and I'm not going to get into that. Okay, so we solved the insta-hide challenge. Does this invalidate insta-hide security claim? Okay, so we broke the challenge that they put together. By the way, no, I mean, in some sense, we broke their challenge, but they didn't have sort of a formal guarantee. So, in some sense, we broke their challenge, but if you don't, it's like if you don't have a formal guarantee, what does really break? We didn't have a formal theorem that, hey, their theorem 2.1 was wrong, or something like that, because they didn't have a proof that we, typically see in a crypto system. So, by the way, one thing I just wanted to say, how communities are different. Like, I think there was a big back and forth between the authors and various people on Twitter, and it got quite ugly and got very contentious. And I think, to me, I kind of tried to stay away from it. I let Twitter do its thing. And my thing with this was that it was not that one party was wrong, the other party was right. It's basically a impedance mismatch between the two communities. Okay, like in the machine learning community, or for that matter, any other community that's not security, privacy, and crypto, they take, like, if I break your system, it's almost taken as like, hey, I'm calling your children ugly and your family ugly or something. They take it personally, while at least in our community, it's like, okay, yeah, sure, you found this very interesting attack, let's move on, and let's try to fix our system. So to me, more this whole discussion, and you can go on Twitter and see it, showed that how different the communities are and how they differently perceive the breaks. There was another similar algorithm called NeuraCrypt from MIT folks, which we already broke, which we also broke, contact me privately. This was a very long discussion with NeuraCrypt folks. Similar authors here. This appeared, and so here it's a slightly different instance encoding scheme. They have a key associated with the encoding. Remember, in the insta-hide, there was no key, and the learning algorithm learns over it. Other than that, the algorithm is quite similar. And by the way, one thing that, and this is the paper, what is kind of weird. When we published this attack, we had a back and forth with these authors, and again, there's this real impedance mismatch, right? They kind of like, okay, rather than saying, okay, you found an attack, let's kind of get to the root cause and see what's going on.
We have a question. Do you want to answer now, or you want to wait?
Yeah, I want to answer now.
Okay, I'll read it. So regarding insta-hide, there is no information content in the encoded representation. Then classification won't be possible, correct? And he says, my initial thinking was that if you cannot go backwards from encoding to original, then privacy seems to be preserved. I'd appreciate your clarification on that point.
Yeah, that was what the first intuition is bang on, right? What we said is that the fact that these people are getting, the insta-hide is getting very good accuracy, means that it must preserve something about the images in the encoding. Yeah, so the second question,
He's thinking it's
Second
like
question is more about that, hey, if we could not go from encoded back to original, then the privacy is preserved. But what would that mean, right? But I think the two questions are linked. If you cannot go backward from encoded to original, or then in some sense you're saying that the encoding function is kind of one way, right? Original to encoding. Then, so for example, think about this. If I take a real crypto system like AES with a key and encrypt your images, which is a one-way function, kind of, and I cannot go back from encoded to original, I am assuming that the machine learning algorithm will not learn anything, right? So I think in some sense we did go, in InstaHide, we did go backwards from the encoded to the original. So yes, if you could design an encoding system where I couldn't do that representation, go back from encoded to original, but yet learn a good model on encoded images, that would be a big breakthrough. Okay. Does that answer the question?
We could not see it did have no follow-up. I think it probably...
Okay. I can stay as well. So again, I think yes.
Could I ask another quick question about the InstaHide attack? Are you making assumptions about the amount of data that the attacker has access to? Because if you're getting the instances sequentially, you're probably not very good at first, and then you might get better somehow, just like with when you're training a machine learning model.
No, so the game. I'm assuming this is Tony, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Tony, I think the game goes as follows: the InstaHide folks produce a machine learning model that they learn from encoded images, right? Then they give us a bunch of encoded images, and then you have to find out what the original images are. Does that make sense?
Okay, so you have access to, you're not receiving the data, the instances sequentially.
You just, I think the challenge was just you get a blob of these encoded images.
Okay.
Sort of.
Thank you. Yep.
Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so as I said, the only difference between NeuroCrypt and InstaHide was that they had these keys. The keys were some random weights, were some neural networks, and I'm not going to get too much into that. They had two privacy definitions. The first was they had some, by the way, they did have some proofs and definitions, but the proof and definitions were in some idealized model. And when you instantiate it using neural networks, it just, those idealized assumptions didn't carry over. And I'm not going to get too much into that. And their challenge was the following, that they gave you some original images and encoded images, and you have to match. You have to play a matching game, like you play in a newspaper, saying, oh, this is that. And we took their challenge and we were perfectly able to do it. Now, their second challenge was kind of weird. It says, oh, we give you a set of encoded data, and you should output a key that is similar to K, which is like saying, I give you a bunch of ciphertext, encrypted ciphertext, and you have to do a full recovery attack. So we didn't do the challenge 2 because we didn't think that was very reasonable. Okay, and we got almost 100% thing on NeuroCrypt. And again, it was the same thing. I won't get too much into it, but the basic idea was we were able to train an embedding such that in that embedding, give us some information about where were the two images close in the embedding space. I'm not going to actually. I want to make my closing remark, and we didn't do challenge 2 because we didn't think it was an appropriate challenge. Okay, so we didn't actually do challenge 2. So for example, like if I have an encoding function that takes an image X and reveals it, but then applies a pseudo-random function to the key, well, it satisfies the challenge 2, but the scheme is not privately secure. So we didn't think it was actually sort of a reasonable challenge. And then we have similar theorems in that as well. So I'm going to kind of skip through that. The basic idea again was that NeuroCrypt is not private in the proposed threat model, and the challenge 2 was not relevant for privacy. Now, let me tell you what is frustrating for me, and I'll sort of use this a little bit before I kind of go into the closing remark, is that almost like, I think there are people following up on InstaHide, there are people following up on NeuroCrypt, there are people, the same authors are giving talks, and there's no kind of this acknowledgement of these attacks that we have come up with. It was their challenge, and there's almost no acknowledgement of these attacks, which I think is also slightly different from how we do it in the security, privacy, and crypto community, where if there is attack, you kind of acknowledge it and you sort of use this to refine your algorithm and maybe rethink. This is kind of sort of like, to me, a little bit of disheartening kind of thing, that there is still a sort of a distance between the two communities. I actually got few papers to review in NeurIPS, even though I was not a reviewer. The area chair said, hey, can you do a couple of reviews? And they were all sort of follow-ups on small tweaks on InstaHide NeuroCrypt, which I'm sure if there is a kind of a motivated student, they can probably break it. And we are already tired of breaking the stuff. And again, this to me is not that saying that the other community is malicious or like not good or something. I think it's a mindset difference. So I would like you to kind of look at our papers. There's a very nice discussion on the InstaHide thing on the blog that Sanjeev Arora has, where he discusses our attack and and how people comment. You should look at it, and that will show you the different mindset. Now, instance encoding is not an isolated case. There are many informal ML notions that are broken based on model watermarking, this and that. And the key and the key here is, and a lot of these are broken by my first co-author, Nicholas Carlini. And a lot of these are broken because a lot of these systems are not designed with an adversary mindset. They are not basically saying, oh, okay, now the adversary knows that I'm doing this. Let me see what attack can I mount. So we need a lot of work here in sort of a science of attacks for ML, if you know what I mean. Unless we can clone Nicholas Carlini 5 million times, we need some way, and there are people working on it. I just saw a paper which was trying to give a blueprint for these adaptive attacks. Now, security projects, which is a good thing. I think that's a good. I see a thing by Gary. I will answer Gary very soon. So, are these challenges enough, right? Now, like, okay, if you can break a challenge, surely the system is not secure, but it's just because somebody couldn't break your challenge doesn't mean the system is secure. So for example, right, I mean, like in standard crypto, we have proofs. This is the semantic security game for in CCA. And all I'm saying is a challenge is not like a substitute for doing these formal proof arguments. For example, like, you solve, suppose you put out a factoring challenge and nobody solves it, okay? Just nobody's able to factor this big number. Does that mean crypto systems are secure? No, you have to still do a proof. So for example, right? I mean, like, I didn't know this. This came from one of my co-authors. Zodiac cipher withstood cryptanalysis for 50 years, but it's not, at least most crypto people won't say that the Zodiac cipher is a secure crypto system. So all I'm saying is challenge is a good step, but it is not a substitute for a formal argument. So what lessons did we learn? At least we should attempt to have formal definitions and arguments. You have to go beyond just attacking your defense with existing attacks. You have to think about, hey, now I published this thing. What if an attacker knows I'm using this scheme? How can they attack that attack? Like hiding defense algorithms, we know this in security, privacy, and crypto, but hiding defenses from the attacker is not a good strategy. Saying, hey, okay, because attacker also has access to archive, right? Now the other thing which is I'm finding a little bit disconcerting is that a lot of old ideas from different sub-communities that were broken are coming up in new guises in different settings. So let me give you an idea. So there used to be this field called information watermarking pictures. So the idea was that you took a picture of, I don't know, some picture that you want proprietary information of, you put some watermark on it. So later, let's say you see pop on my website and I'm taking credit for it, you can go to the judge and say, hey, I can extract a watermark from this picture and prove that it is mine. A lot of these schemes were broken, and a lot of these schemes were broken by Ross Anderson's group, I think. And in some sense, the field kind of died out because every new scheme was kind of broken. And what I am finding is a lot of those old watermarking schemes are coming back in different guises in machine learning. Oh, we can use watermarking to defend against backdoors. We can do watermarking to defend against model extraction. And I would say that if you're a PhD student and want, I think those are ripe to be broken, to be honest with you. I am very skeptical of all these watermarking based defenses, because I know the history from the other side. So please don't forget some older fields that have had similar attacks, okay? So those are the lessons learned, and hopefully I sort of showed you the impedance mismatch between how security, privacy, and crypto people sort of talk and think about things and the others. And I think we need to kind of bridge the impedance mismatch and sort of come together a little bit. Otherwise, what will happen is it just becomes, like this. We need to go beyond just Twitter wars and try to get sort of. So on that note, I take questions.
So we already have a question from Gary Stonburner. So it's a little bit long, so let me read his paragraph. He said,
I can read it.
You can read it? Okay, that's great. You can see that's great.
Okay, requesting your thoughts on the following. The pragmatic reality is that facing intelligent maliciousness better is wildly different from good enough. And it is not clear that this reality is widely seen as such. Reducing the errors is ineffective. The result is not correct enough to make attacks either infeasible or not worth the effort. And there is need to reevaluate security assumptions when infeasible or not worth the effort has been deemed the case. We might go there because that is where we want to go, not necessarily because such assumptions are well grounded in objective grounds for confidence. So I think, Gary, let me sort of, it's a long question, so let me kind of recap. You're basically saying that can we somehow kind of say that, okay, the security here is kind of good enough in some sense, and it can be broken only by very sophisticated attackers, like you guys have Matthew Green or somebody like that, right? Only Matthew Green can kind of break it. I think maybe, but I think I'm very skeptical about that as the follows, right? So let me give you an idea. So InstaHide was, if you look at the authors, right, these are impeccable. Like, I think the credentials are impeccable. I mean, I hopefully everybody is going to sort of agree with that. Let's just say Epic Systems reads that paper. And Epic Systems is a medical billing company, one of the biggest ones here in Madison. And they say, oh, great, InstaHide is, from this university. We are going to take all the data of our clinics and put it in InstaHide, encode it using InstaHide, put it on a public website so that medical researchers can use it. Okay. Now, notice that only takes one attacker who knows, by the way, knows our paper to implement that attack, and then de-anonymize the whole thing. All the patient data is de-anonymized. So in the attacker thing, there needs to be one smart person who attacks it. Then the attack scales, right? In fact, I'm spending my time at Google in sort of in more. My official org is the Android org, and we have a lot of malware. Some of the malware is very, very ingenious, but then the other malware is just small tweak of that. So I don't know whether in this context, what would be a good enough security. Like a high school student can break it, but then a high school student, some very smart high school student might break it and then share it with everybody. So I think it's a longer discussion, but hopefully I answered your question. Okay, so Dennis had another one. Thanks so much for a wonderful, informative talk with respect to privacy for ML. What techniques do you think have promise? People are bridging that accuracy gap for differential privacy-based defenses. That DPSDD, that was a big accuracy drop, that is getting better and better. And people are sort of like trying to, for example, there was a paper that got good accuracy by using some public data. So there is work going on in that community. So, but a lot of that work is still in the differential privacy umbrella, but using other information like better feature engineering, maybe some public data gives you more information, that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think it's a very active area. Okay. Yanzi, let me know when I need to shut up. Trevor says preserve privacy would be useful in list. Yeah, so basically what you're saying is that, do some feature engineering, get the right features out of the images or your data, and then only learn on that. Point that can you features sort of so that you can learn what you want to learn? Like, let's say you want to learn some disease information. Will your features have enough information about that? So that's kind of the game that we are playing. Yeah, so Gary, that is an absolutely very good point, that in some cases, the accuracy drop that we get from DPSDD might be okay based on the context, right? And that's absolutely right. What you're basically saying is that these privacy-preserving ML algorithms need to be evaluated in the context. Context of, for example, maybe for some tasks, if this, the drop is 10, 15%, that's okay. Okay, so you have another question, and rather than a question on what is good enough, it is explicit that there is good enough and what has been done might not be good enough. Yeah, that's true. But I think what I want to actually make a plug for is that we want to go a couple of steps, little bit more than just saying, oh, paper deadline is coming up, let me publish whatever I have. We need to at least look at our own algorithms with a critical eye, which we do in security, privacy, and crypto. Not that we are not deadline driven, we are all deadline driven too. So yeah, that I completely recognize that. Okay.
I think we still have time for questions. If you have questions, you can type in the Q&A. At the same time, I think I'll use the time to ask my question.
Sure.
So that's you mentioned about like the famous paper from ICLR 2021 talk about use like a different good features to train like a model.
But I think the model was pretty shallow. They were just mostly using logistic or something like that, right?
Yes, but I remember they have like a good encoder to output like good features. So my question is on that. So because like those encoders usually are trained from like a public data, and that the private data also somehow like maybe one C for 10, another maybe C for 100. So how do you make sure? How do they make sure like those data that or trained the encoder does not have overlap or does not contain information that are related to the private data?
So the way I think about this is the following, right? I mean, let me draw an analogy from a crypto system. If your side information, so if the encoder is trained on the private on a public data, let's say some Instagram images or something like that, that is fine. By definition, that encoding doesn't have anything from the private training set. I think where the insta-hide people got in trouble with that, the mix-up was mixing up the private and the public data. So for example, if Florian Tramer and Dan Bonnet's algorithm, which I don't think they do, the encoding function was from learning from the public data and some training data mixed in, then things get murky. Otherwise, it's by definition private, right? Because your public data is available to the attacker. I think the insta-hide people, remember the mix-up step, right?
Yes, I remember.
Which was the sort of the two. So that's where they got in. If you just use public data and somehow there's no mixing between the training data and the public data, I think it should be fine. Do you see the difference?
Yes, I see the difference.
Okay. Yeah, if my encoding function was purely trained on public data and I just used it, then insta-hide is fine.
I see.
But the thing was the insta-hide, the mix-up step, and then the random, it was actually mixing the private and the public data.
So what do you think is the solution? For example, we see that's a DP instant hide, like that's a follow-up of instant hide. Do you think that will be the?
Yeah, again, the problem. I mean, I don't know. See, the problem is this. It's like, I mean, I'm not saying that DP insta-hide is broken or not broken, but the idea is, has somebody looked at it critically and tried to break it? I'm not sure. And frankly, I see a lot of follow-ups. And see, because I don't know whether you saw the controversy with the ICML, the best paper, of the distinguished paper that was on differential privacy and machine learning. There was a lot of controversy that it got the best paper, it's not correct, and so on. It's the same thing, you need somebody with a very critical eye who knows the literature to actually look at this stuff and try to break it. I mean, I'll give you this thing where we are trying to do something with the rejection option, where classifiers say, "Oh, I refuse to classify this," and there are a lot of such kind of things in the literature published in top venues. What we did is we tried to get some people like Nicholas Carlini involved, saying, okay, how should we try to attack this? Every paper in that thread, including our own algorithm, fell to that attack. Okay.
Yeah, I think we probably need to close out. It's already past noon.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. It was great talking to you all. And
we have a closeout, so I'll send you the link on the chat. You can go there. And I would like to thank all the attendees to attend this seminar. We have another seminars that are going to come next month. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I send the link so you can go there. It's a closeout.
Okay.